from Kansas City, Missouri, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, the Director of Local Government Services for the Mid-America Regional Council, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. We engage the brightest minds in local government. Today I'm visiting with Sandy Spang, Executive Director of the Toledo Metropolitan Area Council of Governments, better known as TMACOG, in Toledo, Ohio. Sandy has a really fascinating career that has taken her from small business owner to elected official to city staffer, and now she's leading the Regional Council of Governments. We're going to discuss Sandy's story and the lessons that she has learned through her wide-ranging roles in government. Sandy, welcome to GovLove.
Well, good morning, Lauren.
Good morning. We are thrilled to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. You know, I first became familiar with ELGL as an elected official at my first National League of Cities event, and I believe I still have some ELGL socks.
Oh, yeah. Love those socks. Thanks for making a plug for that, and glad that you found your way to engagement with us, and we are excited to get to learn a little bit more about you this morning. So we will start by just diving in with our lightning round to get to know you a little bit better on a personal level. So my first question for you is, tell us about something that you are reading or watching, and tell us whether you recommend it.
Well, I just finished a fantastic book. Ever a mom, I often will send books to my children that I think will interest them, and I'll read them, and then I have something to discuss with them. And my youngest son lives in New York City. He's become a true New Yorker, and he works for New York City. So I guess you could say it's the family business, local government. And I had heard from a friend about All the Beauty in the World. The author was a staffer at the New Yorker, and I think kind of had an existential crisis when his brother was received a terminal diagnosis and went to work for the Metropolitan Museum of Art as a guard for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And wrote a book about it then. And so I sent it to my son, read it myself. My son's been handing it around to friends in New York City, and it's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it. It's about art, it's about grief, but what I love about it is it's about reinvention. And that's been a theme, you kind of mentioned the different things I've done. That's kind of been a theme in my life, and about how you bring your previous experiences and skills into your new venture. And so, I think as maybe a writer previously, a journalist, he kind of brought his observational skills and then eventually his writing skills into the book. But it's a beautiful book. So yes, I highly recommend All the Beauty in the World.
All the Beauty in the World. Okay, I'm always looking.
And then my daughter's a translator, and I sent her a very odd book called The Extinction of Irina Ray, and that one, I enjoyed it. Very different. It's about the role of translators. I'll say for some people it'd be perfect. I heard about it on NPR, and I'll say check it out. Read the review before you get it.
Okay.
So that's it. That's a review it's a recommendation for some.
All right, one more lightning round question for you. Describe your perfect weekend.
Well, I would always love it if my whole family is together, and that's rare because they, two of my kids live far away, but it's wonderful when we have everybody together. So that's always a tops, but and if that happens, that's great. But if not, there are always things to do in the Toledo area, and a lot of them center around water. I love to swim, and I'm part of a master's swim group, which masters just means adults, and I am probably one of the slowest swimmers, but I am getting better all the time. And we can kayak. We live very close. Our home is really close to the Maumee River, which is a tributary to Lake Erie. And so we can kayak. We can launch the kayak very close to our homes. My husband and I like to take the kayak out. He has a little sailboat that we take out to Lake Erie, and we can sail around the islands. So that's great. Of course, a ball game is good. Trip to the farmer's market. Wonderful restaurants. Toledo loves its restaurants, and we have a wide variety of restaurants here. But we are also known to put the badminton set up. So, we have all kinds of fun here in Toledo. And we've also got some great bike trails. We're developing one called the Chessie Circle. And we just had an announcement here. We got some funding. We're hoping to get a bridge built across the Maumee River, joining two counties. So we're adding pieces to that bike trail. So bicycling is another thing I love to do. So a lot of, I guess, active things. If I've had a weekend where we've been outside, that's a great weekend for me.
Yeah, you are painting an idyllic picture. This vision of just getting on the kayak and floating down the river close to your house. That sounds wonderful.
Well, I guess I painted a spring, summer, fall picture. We do have winter here in Northwest Ohio too, and we've got winter fun too because we, our metro parks, which was named the number one metro parks in the United States, which is pretty exciting.
That is exciting.
We're in the middle of a $200 million Riverwalk project, which includes the Glass City Metro Park, and there is a skating ribbon, which is really, it even has grade changes, Lauren. It
Oh,
has like
that's cool.
little hills. I told my sons that, and I said, we're going to go skating at Christmas on this ribbon. It has grade changes. And they were like, no, Mom, no grade changes. And I, no, really. And they were surprised that it does, which is quite a feat to freeze ice on a grade change.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. So we've got that. There's some sledding over there at the new Metro Park. And I think they were estimating about 2 million visitors a year, and I think they've exceeded that. I think it's getting about 3 million visitors a year. It is amazing. This park is fantastic. There's a splash pad that we do water quality work here at TMACOG, and there's a splash pad that actually has an accurate depiction of our watershed. So children really learn some water quality. They get some water quality education while enjoying a splash pad, which I love. And so that in the winter provides some great wintertime fun as well. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing so much
Yeah.
about Toledo. In your response, one of my favorite things about GovLove is getting to learn about new people and places. So I'm going to have to add Toledo to my getaway list. All right, well, let's get into the heart of our interview. We kind of teed it up here, Sandy, that you have had many different roles as a professional and a public servant. So maybe you can start by just telling us about your career before public service when you were managing properties as a small business owner.
Yes. I didn't envision becoming an elected official or public servant when I was younger. My undergraduate degree was in fine arts, jewelry and metalsmithing, worked for 17 years in the jewelry industry, became a gemologist, worked for a small family-owned chain, 9 stores, and one of the owners passed away. And at 24, I became the diamond buyer for a 9-store chain. Eventually, my husband and I began to acquire rental properties, a lot of sweat equity and commercial and residential rental properties. And eventually, one of those properties I bought right before the Great Recession and realized that no one was going to come along and rent the commercial part of it. And so developed it into the first of 2 independent coffee shops that I developed and owned. And each of those experiences, I gained knowledge that I brought into my work as an elected official and eventually in administration and now at TMACOG. Certainly learning customer service, I think, is very important as an elected official. Learning to work with vendors, understanding, the first time that you vote on an RFP, you think back to times when you've worked with vendors, right? So property management, I always say, running a city is kind of a big property management project. And so, and also having interacted so many times with the city as someone who owned properties, as someone who had to, have those kinds of interactions that a business has with their city, I think that was really helpful because I knew what it was like to apply for those permits. I knew what it was like to you have those interactions. And sometimes I was frustrated by them. So, especially things like sign code, I was determined to make a difference in our sign code because of experiences that I had had. So I brought all of those things to my experience. And some of those were reasons that I decided to run for elected office.
So, yeah, tell us about that. How did you get from business owner to local elected official?
Well, it was really that coffee shop. Um, the reason that we acquired the building where we put the coffee shop was that my husband had really been mentored by the man that owned the building. I think he worked on that building when he was like 16 years old. And the man had always said, I'll sell you that building someday, Mark. And it was a mixed use building, a really neat building built in the 1920s, neat retail strip in a nice middle class neighborhood, all brick, apartments up, retail down. But you know what? It was mostly vacant up and down that little strip. The homes were still very nice in the neighborhood. Um, Homes were in demand, but people didn't look at that little retail strip anymore because it was like so many little real retail strips in the neighborhood. Some of them even in more disrepair. As you had big box stores move in. You saw these little retail strips empty out, and people no longer even thought about them anymore. And so I think there were only two of maybe 8 or 10 storefronts that still had anything in them. And so, but the apartments were still occupied. So he finally decided it was time for him to sell right at the beginning of the recession. And so we bought the property, and apartments were no problem. That we had mostly had residential properties, but I thought, what am I going to do with this commercial space? Nobody was coming forward to rent the space, and it needed work. So I told my husband, I think I'm going to redevelop it as a coffee shop. I had always loved. I studied abroad, and I had my first cappuccino in Italy. This was before there was Starbucks, or probably the only place you were going to likely get an espresso in the United States was an Italian restaurant in New York. It wasn't something you found typically in the States. And I always loved independent coffee houses, and so I thought, I want to do this. And I went to some coffee conferences and things and educated myself, and I thought, I'm going to do this. So we gutted the place and built out a coffee shop and brought some new things to Toledo. But that experience really, really taught me some things that really inspired me. First of all, how difficult it is when you have a change of use in Ohio, and I think most places, because it's based on the much state building code is based on international building code, I think. And it's when you have a change of use, you have to pretty much bring the building up to new construction standards. So you're talking about new firewalls, sometimes sprinklers, certainly accessibility. So you're going to be putting in handicapped accessible bathrooms. And so these things make the cost of outfitting that space sometimes prohibitive for an entrepreneur or for the landlord when you compare it to what the rent's going to be. So that was something that was on my mind. Also, concerned that, hey, here I am in this strip and I'm going to be the only business that's upgrading. So I went to the city and got the last of one of their facade grants that they had, that generation of facade grants they had. And rather than using it myself, I reached out to the other property owners and divvied it up and said, hey, how about we all get new storefront glass and we all get new awnings and we make this whole strip look better. And I had an architect do sort of a rendering to show everybody what it would look like. And we revitalized that little strip. It is now a thriving strip. There's a little deli, there was Pilates now, there's an interior designer. It's a great little strip. And I really became inspired to think these are everywhere in almost every neighborhood throughout the city. We could revitalize these forgotten retail strips throughout the city, and that really was the inspiration for me to run for elected office. I thought, and I thought we need small business owners represented on city council. I also had some serious frustration with the sign code. Our sign code had been added on as different types of signs came on the scene. So we had whole sections of signs that were popular in the 1950s or 60s. We had a big section on the little flip card type signs, but all I wanted was to put my logo on an awning, and I couldn't do that. I had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals because that was not allowed. So those things came together, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And I ran for office and was elected out of a group of 23 running in the primary for 6 spots, narrowed it to 12, and then down to 6. And I came in third and was an at-large council member.
This is really a remarkable and inspiring story that you bought this property kind of at the peak of the recession and made some courageous and risky moves to open a new business with the coffee shop and then rallied your neighbors to do something cooperative together to redo the facade. So thanks for sharing that. I'm kind of inspired by the perseverance that you had. So you get elected. Now you come onto the city council. I know that in that first year of service, you weathered some emergency and traumatic events. Could you tell us a little bit about some of those challenges in your first year and how you responded?
Yes, 2014 was a very traumatic year in the life of the city of Toledo. Within that very first month, we tragically lost 2 firefighters in what was an arson fire. And I learned very quickly about just the brotherhood, sisterhood of firefighters. We, in attending the services, the last call services for those firefighters, we had firefighters from Canada, from Texas, New York, all over the country that came, and just the tragedy of that. I was so profoundly affected by that. And then many people have probably heard of the Toledo water crisis. We had, I woke up one morning, I was an early riser, I owned a coffee shop. And so there was an alert on my phone about water. And we had shut down our water plant, which served 500,000 residents, not just of Toledo, but of our region. Toledo served the surrounding suburbs as well. And as a newly elected city council member, you had this feeling that I know that I should be, I felt responsible, and yet I didn't really feel that I had the tools to really be effective to do anything. And so it was an incredibly difficult time for our region. So we have since adopted a regional water model. So we have 40-year contracts with our suburban neighbors. And that's been a wonderful move. We plan capital improvements together. And So that was a great thing. But that was a really difficult time for the city of Toledo and for the region to weather, to go through that time. And then at the end of the year, our newly elected mayor, who'd served just 1 year, was elected at the same time as I did, tragically died. And the president of city council was automatically elected to the position of mayor. So it was a really difficult first year as an elected official.
Yeah, you went through a lot, but stuck it out. What is one of your proudest legislative accomplishments during your time as a city council member?
So, there were a couple of things that I think I was really pleased I was able to do. And some of them weren't big legislative things. Because of my experience in property management, I very quickly I realized that the city had over 200 structures and didn't annually update a, a maintenance plan. How old are the furnaces? How old are the roofs? So when do we expect to have to address some of these things? So I passed legislation requiring that, and they still update that to this day. And so I'm pleased about that. I was alarmed at the rapidly accelerating number of 911 calls that were medical in nature. And we had sort of an ad hoc group of people, entities involved in healthcare. I called them together. It was insurers, it was clinics, just brought anybody I could together who was involved in healthcare. And we met multiple times and determined that some of this was due to the fact that we didn't have a robust 211 system. We had farmed it out to community that where the call takers often didn't even know how to pronounce the names of the streets in Toledo. And so I passed legislation requiring that any nonprofit organization that, well, there's a little bit more to the story, actually. So there had been kind of a loss of trust and confidence in our 211 system. But we had a dynamic new leader of our United Way organization. She brought 211 back to Toledo, brought it in-house, but there still wasn't confidence in the system. So I passed legislation saying if you got community development block grant dollars from us, you had to register and list your services with 211. Now that sounds ridiculous. That sounds like, of course you would. But believe it or not, there wasn't confidence. And that was actually controversial legislation. But it helped to shore up 211. It helped to give them a more robust listing of services. And so it was a small piece of legislation, but it was a little bit difficult to pass. And so I was pleased about that. We now have a robust 211 system, and that was just a small part of helping make that happen. And then I was able, through what I had learned at National League of Cities about priority-based budgeting, I was able to bring priority-based budgeting to Toledo, and we did use that program. And I think it made a real difference in understanding our budget. So those are some of the highlights of my legislative accomplishments.
ELGL is excited to celebrate the 9th annual City Hall Selfie Day on August 15th. This is your opportunity to showcase pride in local government by snapping a selfie in front of your favorite local government building. Just use the hashtag City Hall Selfie and tag ELGL when posting your pics on social media. Get your friends, get your coworkers, and get creative to compete for prizes in categories including Best Dressed, Best Community Engagement, and People's Choice. Visit elgl.org for more information. We cannot wait to see your beautiful faces and your community pride on August 15th. Yeah, thank you. You were involved in some really important work. You mentioned priority-based budgeting. I'd love to talk a little bit more about your budgeting experience. In our preparation for this interview, I learned something new, that cities in Ohio are primarily funded through income taxes, and that creates some interesting financial challenges for service delivery. How did you experience this on Toledo City Council?
Yes, cities in Ohio are primarily funded, their general funds are primarily funded through income tax. Many cities have income tax, but in Ohio, they're primarily funded, the general funds are primarily funded through income tax. So, for example, Toledo receives about 4.5% of the property tax within its borders and 0% of the sales tax. So it is primarily funded, the general fund is primarily funded through income tax. Now, the problem is that goes down first in a downturn and comes up last in an upturn. So when I took office in 2014, we were very much still feeling the effects of the recession. We had not repaired or replaced a sidewalk in 5 years.
Wow.
Because we were still really dealing with a recession era budget. So it is a very unstable method of funding municipal government. You need a much larger reserve fund when you're primarily funded by income tax, jobs become your number one economic development focus when you're funded by income tax. Certainly, I don't think it's the preferred method,
Hmm.
but it's Ohio's method.
Yeah. Really interesting. I mean, I've worked in a community that was heavily dependent on property tax, and I think most cities are really reliant on sales tax. So this is a new one for me. I can see how that funding stream would be challenging.
And what's interesting is most of your residents aren't aware of it. They will say to you when they call you or meet you in the community, they'll say, "I pay my property taxes. Why is my road not repaired?"
Oh, of course.
And you say, "Well, those property taxes do fund the schools,
Rules.
but most of that money goes to either levies or to the state. Now we do many things are funded by levies. Then over time, many things have rolled off into levies. For example, libraries and metro parks and things like that. So those are levy funded through property taxes, but municipal government, income tax.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let's pivot and hear about your other life in City Hall. After you left your service on the City Council, the mayor invited you to join his administration to work on economic development. So, what was rewarding about that transition? And then tell us what was challenging about it as well.
Yes, well, so many of the things that I cared about and hoped to accomplish as a city council member were actually easier to accomplish as an administrator and working in economic development. Um, I do believe in, pursuing education at whatever level that you're at. So I became involved with the Ohio Economic Development Association and became an Ohio economic certified economic developer, and which was very helpful, and was able to implement some programs that I had called for as a city council member. So I kind of asked myself, am I a legislator or am I administrator at heart? And I think I have ability in both areas, but I will say as an administrator, you can really implement those things that, you want to see happen a little bit more easily. So I think that's very rewarding. I was able to make some programs happen. For example, I mentioned how difficult it is to overcome the issues of code upgrades. So I was able to implement a white box program where we were able to offer grants for things like fire upgrades and accessibility upgrades for first floor vacant commercial spaces, some of which had been vacant for decades, but it was just a bad math problem. There was just no economic incentive for the landlord and to upgrade that space because the rent wasn't going to make sense, right? For the it was going to cost you maybe $75,000 to upgrade a 1,500 square foot space, and it just wasn't going to pay out in the rent. So we offered those grants, and that program is still happening today, and as part of something called the Vibrancy Initiative, where we coupled it with a new improved facade grant, and then of course the Community Reinvestment Area program, which is a Ohio program, a tax abatement for improvement that is made to properties. And so that altogether has really incentivized improvements of some of our longstanding vacant buildings. So that was something very exciting I was able to do. What was challenging is I took this position just a couple of months before COVID.
Oh,
And
right.
so, yes, and my focus in joining the administration was to be a support to small businesses. So I was creating a new position. And so I was able to use $1 million of our CARES Act money to create a program just for micro businesses who were not likely to be able to access the SBA dollars, Paycheck Protection Program and EIDL. Those programs were unlikely to be able to work for them. So we did stand that up, and we made very small grants, micro grants, to about 270 businesses, about 60% minority, about 70% women-owned businesses. And that was great because I then had a relationship with these businesses and then was able to help them with other services.
It's really great. Would you consider that your proudest accomplishment from your time as a city staffer working on economic development?
Well, those certainly were among them. I certainly was very proud of that, but I also was able to make a difference in permitting.
Mm.
Just found that so many people felt that the city was working against them in trying to get their projects done. So I created something called Permit Planner. It's a scoping tool. You put your project in. I want to open a yoga studio, and you go in and you kind of tell how big your space is and what you're going to do, and you work your way through it. It tells you not only what permits you're going to need, but what incentives might be available if you're in an historic district and that you maybe need to go before that historic committee, and it even prices the permits and tells you where to apply for the incentives. And I think Permit Planner, to be honest with you, I think that's maybe the thing that it was very hard to get the zoning code and the entire building code all on that program. That is, I think maybe that might be my proudest accomplishment.
Yeah, you've really done a lot. And now, of course, you are serving in a new role as executive director at TMACOG. What attracted you to service at the regional level?
I don't think there's ever been a time when collaboration was more important. The tsunami of money that we've seen from the federal government is very much based on collaboration, holistic impacts. And so I think bringing people together is something that I've always, I think, felt was, I think it was a skill of mine, connecting people to resources, connecting people to people. And so I think that that really appeals to me, the idea that I can help our region be more collaborative, be more connected. I guess I'm a regionalist at heart. Um, so that I think has just incredible appeal to me. Um, we just graduated 22 new water operators yesterday in a program we stood up. We call it the Water Workforce Coalition, because there's a looming shortage in operators for water treatment plants and wastewater plants. And we got a grant from the EPA to create this program. They predict that nationwide, up to 50% of water operators are going to retire in the next 10 years. And so our water treatment plants and wastewater plants throughout the region are really concerned about this. So to be able to see a problem throughout the region and bring everybody together and work together to create a program and then find funding for it and you know be able to do this something regional like this, and everybody was at the graduation yesterday. I thought, this is fantastic, this is solving a problem together. So incredible appeal to me to be able to do something like that.
Well, you are speaking my love language, Sandy, as a fellow lover of regionalism. And I was taking notes here on your Water Workforce Coalition. We're doing some work in the public sector workforce space, and I'm always looking for good ideas. And that sounds like a great one. I'll have to learn more about that.
Yeah, we think it's something that could be replicated in other places, because every so many of the operators came on after the Clean Water Act in the 70s, and now
Mhm.
they're looking to retire.
Sure.
And it's a great career, and but it doesn't have a lot of visibility. So very exciting.
That's great. What is a top priority you hope to accomplish at TMACOG?
Well, I think members of a council of governments are voluntary members. And so this goes back to my early days in retail and customer service. I want to find those things that will bring the greatest value to our members and find ways to really serve them. Right now, I think the way that I can do that is to form an economic development district. We don't bring a lot of economic development administration dollars into our area. And I think that if we can form a district, I think that will be helpful. And so we're going to be applying to do the next iteration of the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategic Plan here at TMACOG. The previous one was led by Bowling Green State University. They are an EDA university center, so we're working closely with them to transition that over here. So we're going to be adding economic development to our current work in transportation, water, and water quality. So I'm very excited about that. So I got to bring that economic development piece over
Yeah.
from my work at the city. So I'm very excited about that. But we also we started a program. This is kind of exciting. Another acronym, because boy, we are in the world of acronyms, Lauren. Here, oh man, I
Well
um,
said.
I know. So we call it Glean. Government leaders. Oh my goodness, I may forget what the E is for. Uh, that would be great if I forget my own acronym. Government leaders exhibiting affinity network. I think the E I might have wrong there. But anyways, the idea is to bring people together to share knowledge and to share best practices. And we brought administrators together from townships and villages. And
Hmm.
we've got some retirements happening, and like how to buy salt, how to lease a fleet, things that some of the old hands really know how to do. Some of the newer administrators would really glean a lot of information
So what you
from.
did there.
Yeah, yeah. And so then we brought fiscal officers together, and they have been meeting on a quarterly basis. And the next thing they said, hey, can utility billers come together? They'd like to all get together. So we see incredible future for this. And this is a thing that it doesn't really cost anything to bring everybody together, but the value is so high.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of future for that. And that's the kind of thing that a council of governments can do, is they can provide that collaborative space, that opportunity to come together and share information, break down walls, and say, let's bring everybody together to share information. And because we're really finding out that we all do the same sorts of things, and we can share information, maybe even find opportunities to buy things together collaboratively, save money because we're economy of scale, that sort of thing. So we're excited to see where Glean takes us. So that's a new program. So yeah, just bring value to members. Look for new ways to serve them.
Well, the regional council is very lucky to have someone with your
Oh,
depth of experience helping them figure out where those places of value are. So I wish you best of luck as you continue on that journey. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
I just feel so privileged to be able to work in local government. I think everything is happening at the local level. I think I've heard this called the century of the city, because I think we at the local level are having to solve the problems. I don't think that we can look to higher levels of government to really solve the problems that we're facing. And I think it's an exciting time to be doing this work. I feel privileged that life has brought me to this point.
Oh, what a wonderful sentiment. I couldn't agree more. And of course, Gov Love, that's what we're all about,
Yeah,
celebrating the people and the stories that are doing the incredible work at the local level that is so important. And I think you're right. Like, what did you say? The century of the city?
yeah. I
Yeah,
read that. I think it's a great thought.
yeah, I agree. That's spot on. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for joining GovLove and telling us about your incredible journey in all things local government and the private sector. And very excited to see what you do next. Before we wrap up, Sandy, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
Okay, I am a Natalie Merchant fan.
Oh, okay,
So,
yeah. Sure.
yep. So let's go way back. Um, I will choose. I like a lot of her songs, and if you're really feeling down and you want to wallow in it, and you're feeling, something really tough in your city or your region, you can listen to "Break Your Heart," because that's one that'll really that's one. But if you want to feel like I was talking about, just how privileged we are to do this work, and how in a seize the day kind of song. Let's go with "These Are the Days" by 10,000, when she was with 10,000 Maniacs. These are the days.
These are the days. All right. Thank you, Sandy. That's a great
Good point.
pick.
All right.
So
Lauren,
that
it
is
was so much fun.
It's so much fun. Thank you for coming on. I'm inspired by you, Sandy. You've done so much, and you just have a great personality. We scheduled our call early this morning, so you've really started my day off right. I appreciate you coming on the pod.
Well, coffee helps, and you keep telling great stories, Lauren.
Yes, thank you. We will do it. All right. Well, that ends our episode for today. Thank you so much to our guest, Sandy Spang. And thank you to our audience for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/GovLove or on social media at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.